Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jillian DiFilippo from the Tuck School, and I wanted to say thank you so much to Kristen and Josh Tetrick for an amazing keynote. And thanks to our audience for joining. We'll be kicking off our innovative CPG panel now, and we're joined by an amazing group of women who are really shaping the future of CPG. So I'll introduce them. We have Kavita Patel. She's the CMO of PepsiCo's Hive incubator. We have Leigh Hamp, the VP of Product at Banza, and we have Vanessa Pham, the co-founder and CEO of Omsom. So I'd love to kick things off by having each of them introduce themselves. Kavita, can you start?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Kavita Patel. As Leigh mentioned, I lead the brands within the Hive incubator at PepsiCo. My background has really been a zigzag of big and small CPGs. So I started my career at Vitamin Water pre-acquisition to Coca-Cola, then stayed after the acquisition in various marketing and brand management roles. Then left big CPG to do some startup stuff, went to Barkthins for a little bit that eventually exited to Hershey's, went to a brand called Runa, which was a triple bottom line CPG that eventually exited to all markets, and then did some consulting in the space kind of across VCs, across founder-led CPGs as well as some big CPGs, and kind of that is really what led me to deciding to come to PepsiCo to really bring together that idea of big and small in their incubator. So I've been here for a couple of years, and we are sort of trying to create new to the world brands in 200 days from start to finish being launching into the market.
Awesome, thanks so much. Leigh, do you want to do your intro?
Absolutely. So my name is Leigh Hamp, and I am the VP of Product here at Banza. My background is I graduated from undergrad and was a management consultant. Did that for a few years, and then decided I wanted to leave and work at the intersection of innovation and food. So I went back to school and got my master's in product design from Northwestern, and then pivoted into the world of food. I worked at a kitchenware company called Pampered Chef for a couple of years, and then pivoted to Banza. So I've been at Banza for the past 3.5 years, and our mission at Banza is to inspire people to eat more chickpeas and other beans. And so on the product team, what we do is we spend a lot of time thinking about how to make our product lines of pasta, mac and cheese, pizza, and rice the best that they can be, and then innovate in new categories as well. So we spend a lot of time eating a lot of products made from chickpeas. Banza was founded back in 2014, and you can find our products now in over 15,000 stores. So excited to be on the panel today.
Awesome. Thanks, Leigh. I love the new pizza SKU that you guys launched.
Thanks.
And now we'll go to Vanessa.
Cool. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Vanessa. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Omsom. We are a new Asian food brand that exists to reclaim Asian flavors that have been diluted in the grocery store for so long. I started it with my sister about 2 years ago, but we've been in the market for just about a year now. And it's been such a wild ride. Our first product to market is called a starter. It's essentially a pantry shortcut that allows you to create Asian dishes, restaurant quality in under 30 minutes with just a handful of fresh ingredients at your house. We've had a really exciting first year in market. We launched in May of 2020, so in the middle of in the very beginning of the pandemic. And we've been really lucky to build a strong evangelist community and be featured in most kind of national news outlets. So that's a little bit about us. My background at Omsom, I do a lot of different things. I do everything from product and R&D, strategy, fundraising, to operations, logistics, all that good stuff. And my sister does a lot of our content and community and creative. And we're a super small team, but we are really excited to kind of be wrapping up our first year mostly through direct to consumer, and lots more exciting stuff to come, including probably entering into grocery in the next year or so.
Very exciting. Thanks, Vanessa. So we have a broad sampling kind of the CPG space here, all the way from PepsiCo to a medium-sized company like Banza and a startup, Omsom. So I think there'll be really interesting grounds to kind of kick off our conversation. Would love to start off by talking about, this last year, which has been pretty crazy for everyone, but especially crazy for CPG. We saw almost 10% growth as people started to eat more in their homes and less at restaurants. So I'd love to hear more about how this impacted your brand's strategies and how it impacted their supply chains as well. Leigh, do you want to start us off with this one?
Sure thing. Yes, 2020 was a big year for CPG. And even on the pasta side, we saw the chickpea pasta category grow 75%. And a lot of that growth was attributed to Banza, which we were super excited to see. But because of all of that, we had to work really hard to quickly adapt both our product development and our sourcing strategies in order to get the job done and keep our shelves stocked and our customers happy. On the product development side, we actually developed and launched our latest product line, Banza Pizza, during the height of COVID. So we were at our co-manufacturing partner that second week in March when everything was shutting down, and very quickly had to adapt to figure out how to bring a new product to market under completely remote circumstances. So we had to get super creative. Our product team was sort of scattered around the country. We did tastings remotely. Our marketing team did our photo shoot entirely on Zoom with the photographer, and his girlfriend was the hand model because that was the time. And so we just had to get really creative in order to bring things to market. And what it taught us was we could make decisions with a smaller set of people, which was interesting, right? We want to be inclusive and involve everybody on the team. But when we physically couldn't, we had to make some choices, and it ended up being okay. So that was awesome. And then on the sourcing side, we had to make sure that we had enough chickpea flour and other ingredients to keep our lines running. So our strategic sourcing team has built really strong relationships with our partners over the years, and those were really put to the test last year. So they were managing things PO to PO to make sure things could arrive because demand for all of our ingredients was spiked across CPG. And then on the product side, what we had to do was quickly validate secondary suppliers where there were vulnerabilities in our supply chain, just again to make sure that we had enough ingredients to keep our lines running. So it was a crazy year, but it has been a huge year for Banza's growth.
Awesome. It sounds like you guys have really created some different, like more agile ways of working though, as a result.
Yeah.
Kavita, I'm curious, did you resonate with any of those things too, or was your experience different at PepsiCo?
Yeah, no, really similar. Lots of developing products in kitchens, using things that you can find in a grocery store, lots of prototyping in really, really scrappy ways, but similar. I think it's also really shown us, we can do more remote trials. We can do certain things via Zoom and other platforms that, typically at a company like PepsiCo, is not really how things happen. But I think it pushed us to sort of see what could be. And then I think, once we've gotten into market, obviously as new brands and new products, like trial is critical. And so thinking about new ways and new packs, we commercialize some trial packs and, have leveraged digital a lot more than thinking about something like an in-store sampling or events or things like that, where, when you're trying to get a consumer to try a product, there's nothing more sort of, meaningful than an actual taste. And so I think that's been the other piece for us is thinking about ways that we can leverage digital, be a lot more targeted and focused to get the right consumer to try the product. And again, like very difficult times, but I think we gleaned so many lessons that will carry forward and are now just an integrated part of our business.
Definitely. Interesting how you can really get sharper with digital, I think, during a time like this. But I can imagine it's also hard with everyone trying to do that at the same time. It makes it more expensive.
Totally.
Great. I'd love to also talk about, what shifts in behavior have happened on the consumer side. I know those have been pretty dramatic. So what have you seen? How have you adapted to it? And what do you think may or may not stick around as we start to shift towards a new normal? And we can start with Vanessa on this one.
Sure, yeah. I think what we've seen the most is that the consumer at home is more interested than ever in kind of diversifying and elevating their at-home cooking. I think in a pre-COVID world, consumers, when they thought about cooking at home, it was like, okay, how can I make this extremely functional? I just want to get this in a routine. I don't want to think too much. And while they still value that convenience, they do want more variety and they do want a broader range of flavors. And so that's why at Omsom, our starters are really aimed at kind of making, for folks who don't cook Asian food often, making it much more accessible. And then for folks like me who grew up on these flavors, just making it kind of like no-brainer, don't have to think about it, and really flexible to whatever I might have in my pantry. And so, yeah, we definitely saw a much wider variety of types of backgrounds of our consumers earlier on than we expected. From day one, we've always been centering the Asian American audience. That's really kind of who Omsom exists for. That's who we want to make proud and who we want to honor in our products. But when we actually look at our customer base, it's very broad. So over a third of our customers are actually from the Midwest and the South. And it's a very diverse group across all races, and about over half of our customers are actually non-Asian folks. So that was something that we expected kind of later in our journey that kind of happened right out of the gate, and possibly due to kind of the changes in behavior from COVID.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you've been able to be a partner to people in their COVID cooking journeys, which has been kind of mandatory, whether you wanted to go on that or not. Kavita, what are your thoughts on shifts in consumer behavior?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot has changed, and it's across the board. But as we think about specific to food and beverage, just a few of the things that we think have changed and will continue to stick are, some of the at-home behavior. So, if you're using your home as a hub for much more than just where you're entertaining or where you're living, it's now your office. It's now kind of the daycare and everything in between. Obviously, there's a major impact on your relationship with food, and so even as we think about a world outside of COVID restrictions that we've seen, we think that home as a hub, a broader hub, is something that's going to stay. And so, if you have access to your entire pantry versus just a snack drawer, what does that mean for your behavior in terms of how you snack, is something that we're thinking a lot about. I think also online shopping, right? It's something that in the food and beverage space, we had seen growth, in prior years, but really the pandemic just accelerated that. And I think the other piece of that is it forced a lot of cohorts that are maybe averse to online shopping into forcing them into trying it and seeing a convenience factor there where there may have been a barrier. So that's one that we also think will stick. And then last, really this idea of reevaluating and redefining value. I think, we're now all thinking about, is something worth it? Is even a decision to go outside or be around people worth it? And I think even just how we think about our food and beverage sort of worth it equations is also something that's kind of come into question and is being reevaluated across the consumer landscape. So I think there's obviously tons of changes and shifts, but really those are some of the ones that we're thinking about from a food and beverage perspective that will have real lasting power.
Definitely. I think it's been super interesting to watch e-com take off for grocery shopping and, beyond millennials and younger generations. I think my Nana shipped me something on Amazon, like a snack gift, and I was really shocked. I didn't even know that she knew how to prime things. So pretty cool. I'd love to shift gears and talk a little bit more about the process of bringing innovation to market and commercialization. So my first question here is in terms of product innovation, how do you really identify white space that you think is worth going after? Kavita, you alluded to value equation kind of shifting here. And what's the approach that you take to identifying genuine consumer needs so that when you launch something, you can ensure the success of that product? And would love to start this one off with Leigh.
Sure. So the way we think about product innovation in our strategy, it all goes back and ties into our mission of inspiring people to eat more chickpeas and other beans. And that really manifests and starts with, we bring that to life by first talking to our consumers. Our consumers are at the heart of everything that we do. So before COVID, we spent a lot of time in our customers' kitchens, sort of rifling through their pantries with them, seeing what was in their freezers, and really trying to figure out what inspired them from a comfort food and mealtime moment perspective. And we can talk about values down the line, but mealtime and bringing people together around food is really important to us. And so what I've seen is when a consumer starts lighting up about different recipes or food products, there's something there. So what we do is we make a list of those sort of comfort food mealtime moments that really spark joy for our customers. And then what we do is we go start figuring out if we can make them out of chickpeas, because a lot of times that hasn't been done before. So we do some feasibility and development work to say, can you make X out of chickpeas? And once we get to the point of saying, okay, this is pretty good, there's something here, that's when we pursue the opportunity even further. And really our barometer for something being a success is one, first and foremost, our customers want it. And then second, we can make something primarily out of chickpeas that's both delicious and nutritious. We know that it has to pass that tasty bar in order for people to bring it into their homes and feed it to their kids and keep coming back. So talking to our customers every step of the way, once we have an idea, early, mid, and later in development is so key to our process, so that once a product does come to market, our consumers are excited to try it because they've been involved every step of the way. So consumer-centric innovation strategy is super key to what we do. And that works super well for pizza, and we're excited to continue to deploy that as we build out our product portfolio.
Got it, that's really helpful. Kavita, would love to hear how the Hive is thinking about this as well. I know some similar thinking in terms of a lot of consumer research and also pretty consumer-centric type approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And because, we're not anchored into an ingredient or sort of because we're developing new brands, we really start with kind of what we call a 3D approach. So the first D in that is data, and really looking at your conventional data sources, like what are people buying, but also search data, like what are they searching for that doesn't exist, where there are unmet needs like that. Also, where is there innovation in the industry? Just kind of to understand where there's growth, but where there could be pockets of unmet needs. And then once we take that data, we may identify what we call a dig site, a space that has some growth and something interesting. And then we really dive into it also from a human-centric perspective with design research. And so similarly, we used to go to consumers' homes or their workplaces to see how they eat. In the COVID environment, we do different exercises with like a food journal or, sort of photo blogging, what a week in food looks like for you. To really, again, understand, if plant-based protein is popping, why is it popping? Like, what is driving the growth there? What are people looking for? What are some of the pain points and trade-offs that they're having to make today, so that we can understand, okay, like where is the opportunity within this? For example, we launched a keto brand, and I think we all walked into keto having some hypothesis of what consumers must experience. But it was so interesting once we started to talk to them about snacks. It wasn't necessarily that they just missed snack foods, but it was about like the cheese dust on their fingers after they have a bag of chips, or opening a bag and having that aroma hit your nose. And so it was really sort of a deep sort of human understanding of what they're missing beyond just the food that really helps us then bring that to the forefront. As well as the emotive drivers. So a brand that we launched called High Low Life, you'll see is in that keto space, but it's a really different approach from a branding perspective to be more of a snack brand and less of a function forward sort of diet food, if you will. And that was really designed out of a lot of consumers sort of playing back that, they don't want to be reminded that they're on this diet. They want to feel normal. They want to enjoy snacks that they used to have, and that being kind of an end-to-end experience. So once we kind of come out of that design research with a good sense of what the consumer is looking for from both a product and brand perspective, we move into sort of prototyping, starting to understand from a subcat perspective where there's sort of larger opportunities, prioritizing kind of from a product perspective where we want to go. And then we leverage digital. And so for us, in this step, often we are sort of launching things within the digital space, maybe before they're fully commercialized, to get consumer feedback, to understand what gets clicks, what gets sort of email addresses, where there's interest from a consumer. And really, we use those sort of three things to help us identify where we think there's an opportunity to really go innovate. Because again, we're thinking about new brands in different spaces, and it can feel like boiling the ocean. So, sort of leveraging that framework really allows us to figure out where the biggest opportunity is.
Definitely. I love what you said about really uncovering that specific need of the keto consumer to feel normal. And I think if you haven't seen High Low Life yet, the packaging is so fun. Like, you wouldn't necessarily tell it apart from another really big brand in the snack space that Pepsi works on. So I think that's a really interesting insight there.
Yeah, no, thank you. And it is, it's like, I think, it's so gratifying as like people who worked on it to see people, react to the branding and the iconography so positively on social and on Amazon reviews and stuff.
Definitely. Would love to shift to talk one step further into the commercialization process about when you actually set out to produce these products. And I know it can be hard with innovation products because you want to produce a small quantity and test out and see, is this going to work? But the question is, how do we actually execute that? So one way through a co-manufacturer, another through an owned manufacturing facility. I'm curious how you've thought about it for your brands and some of the trade-offs between those two approaches. Vanessa, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, this was definitely something we thought through. I mean, more of the equation that we were thinking about, or the choices, the trade-offs and choices that we were thinking about, was like making it with a co-manufacturer versus making it in a commissary kitchen, just because when we launched, we had no idea kind of what the appetite would be. We were launching direct to consumer. And at that point we hadn't or I mean, even still, I don't know if we would have raised enough to kind of be making or building out a plant ourselves. But yeah, ultimately for us, the decision came from a broader go-to-market strategy and the type of demand that we thought we would receive. So even though we launched in a very lean way with a team of 3 and not a big marketing budget, we really had hope that we would kind of be able to cut through the noise with our storytelling, with our community building. And that's why we decided to get started with a co-manufacturer. And then moreover, I think our packaging format is just like really hard to do in a commissary kitchen. So between those two things, we decided to start with a co-man, and it was definitely a bumpy road getting set up with our co-man, like multiple trials, a lot of learning along the way, and a lot of innovation in terms of product development, because we work with chefs to develop our products. So we work with restaurant chefs who we call tastemakers, and they're iconic Asian chefs from each of the cuisines that we have represented in our product line. Because, even though I'm Asian American, I'm Vietnamese, and I can't purport to be the expert on Korean food and Japanese food and Thai food. And these chefs are incredible. They make the most amazing food in their restaurants across the country. However, they're not experts on the manufacturing process. So they would have really high bars and really high demands around like, okay, well, this is what it tastes like in my restaurant, so you need to make it taste this way in your product. And that was actually a huge blessing, because it really forced us to get creative, to ask the questions that maybe people we worked with on the development side would be like, yeah, no, you can't really do that. And we'd be like, but wait, can we just revisit that? Is there another way? There's got to be a way that to get this point, let's prioritize this specifically. And we were able to do things that I think a lot of other food brands probably would have looked the other way on, because it didn't feel as much of a priority. And the same goes for sourcing. So yeah, it was definitely a challenging process. It was my first time for sure. I had just done 2 years in management consulting, and I was 24 years old and learning it all for the first time. But I'm really happy with where we landed, and we definitely could not have done it without our tastemakers.
Amazing. I love how committed you were to really getting it to that chef level experience. And I feel like that's what a lot of the feedback on your product that I've read reflects. So it's exciting to hear about. Would also love to hear, Kavita, how you think about this, especially given PepsiCo is such a big company and has a lot of owned manufacturing resources, but you're also trying to move quickly. So how do you balance those two things in the commercialization process?
Yeah, and I think when it comes to co-man or own supply chain, obviously PepsiCo owns a lot of assets. We have access to a lot of capital, but I think for us in the incubator, the model is really to take a concept and prove it out, and then think about, sort of owning the supply chain, just because we are an experimental part of the business. We take some chances that work out and become successful. And then there's some things that we do that we quickly realize are not going to be successes, and we have to pivot. So for us, really the approach is to work with co-mans, to leverage sort of the internal R&D capabilities that we have. Obviously, there's PepsiCo is a really broad portfolio of different brands and products within it. So there's tons of expertise. So from a product development side, we want to lean into that. But then when it comes to co-man, we want to sort of mitigate the risk and overinvestment early on. Wait until we figure out if we've got a winner on our hands, and then really think about how do we bring that supply chain over time into more of kind of owned assets by the company.
So kind of test externally, and then if it proves out, then consider bringing it internally.
Yeah, and it just allows us to stay much more sort of nimble, agile, and feel like we can continue to be experimental, and we haven't sort of over-invested into something, which I think makes it difficult to pivot, right? Because, one, you're from a financial perspective really invested, but two, over time you've invested the human capital to sort of make something happen. So I think this model has really allowed us to stay true to like the consumer feedback that we see and we hear.
That makes a lot of sense. Great. Well, I'd love to start talking now a little bit more about consumer engagement and how you're communicating your brands out to your customers in the world. So in that vein, I'd like to talk about driving trial. Since you're launching new innovation products, people don't know that they exist until they exist. So I'm curious how you've thought about driving trial with consumers and how this might have shifted over the course of the past year, if you've tried any new strategies as we've kind of pivoted the way we're living in COVID. And Leigh, we'd love to have you kick this one off.
Sure. So demoing and in-store demos has been critical to Banza's growth since we started. I think a lot of people that have been on the team for a while are used to going out in stores when a new product launches and trying it. And the benefit of that is you can see the product and the brand in the community in the store. Over the course of one day in a New York Whole Foods, you can interact with hundreds and thousands of people, which is incredible. And then the benefit on the product side is you can see people react to your product in real time, and there is no hiding behind their reaction. So you can see how new products are resonating with certain types of people or certain types of consumers, which is really great for us on the product side. So if we see that we need to fine-tune the flavor so that we can make it more acceptable to kids, that level of real-time feedback is it's so immeasurably useful to us. So driving trial with in-store demos has been so important to us. And that was a huge pivot that we had to go through with COVID, when you physically really couldn't go into stores, fewer people were browsing aisles, and no one would take a bite of any food that you were serving over the past year, not to mention they weren't even allowed. So because of our pizza launch, which happened during COVID, we had to change up our mindset in terms of how we drove trial with the product. And I need to hugely credit our marketing team, who did an amazing job sort of pivoting our strategy at the for the launch. And so some of the things that they did were seed our product with so many influencers over the course of pre-launch and launch, so we could get Banza Pizza in the hands of a lot of larger and micro influencers so that they could share the product opportunity and the product and how much they loved it with their community, which then drove trial. And we've continued to do those influencer sends since launch with Banza Pizza month over month, such that we can continue to build that momentum that we would often see and build in store. And then the other thing that we did was we spent a lot of time making sure that our pizza was available on e-com. Shipping frozen was brand new to us. We have had the benefit of a 2-year shelf-stable shelf life product for the past couple of years, and moving into frozen shipping was a huge learning curve for our team. But allowing Banza Pizza to exist online so someone could order it to their home was hugely critical to us, because people didn't feel comfortable going in stores. So you can buy a case of Banza Pizza on our website, and you can buy Banza Pizza in Whole Foods on Amazon Fresh. And so allowing and sort of getting the product into the hands and into the channels where people were actually shopping was really important for the product launch, and will be things that we continue. That said, demos will certainly, I'm sure, return once the time is right.
Great. I love how much you were able to really be innovative there and shifting your trial strategy. Vanessa, I'm really curious how you guys thought about this too, especially as a kind of D2C brand born in the pandemic. This has always been the world you've been living in. So how are you driving trial and really just driving general awareness of Omsom right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I think a common misconception is that for D2C businesses, you have to be promoting to drive trial. I remember during the fundraising process, a lot of investors are like, looking at our projections and be like, oh, like, well, did you bake in a lot of promotions? Because there's no way people are going to try your stuff if you don't incentivize that financially. And we never believed in that. We don't really do any promotions at all. We actually really just go put all of our kind of time and resources in investing in building kind of more of a grassroots movement talking about our product, which then kind of creates this evangelist community that is out there telling their friends who are telling their friends about Omsom. And this is just like, I think for your first year in market, this is like something that we felt was the strongest way to really kind of have a strong hold and be able to cut through the noise as a brand. As a long-term growth strategy, I'm not sure that that's as feasible, but I think when you're getting started as a food brand, really the strongest recommendation somebody can give is, or get is from a friend or from somebody they know. So the way that we kind of went about that is through many different ways. On one hand, it's really shareable packaging. We designed our packaging from the get-go to be shareable, to be experiential. A lot of it is around our storytelling. So it's very authentic and genuine to me and my sister. But I think that we wanted to come and share our story and share our motivations for building our company in a really thoughtful way, and not in just a stagnant, on our About Us page, that's it. We tell that story every single day in different ways, through our emails, through our social media. And I think that emotional connection also drives trial, even though it's not directly tied to the food product. There's just this trust that's built between the consumer, the community, and the company and the brand. And so we've just been really investing in more organic, less transactional means of connecting with the consumer to drive that trial and to drive brand awareness. So that's why, I would say to date, at our 1 year mark, over 90% of our sales, we've sold over 350,000 starters, and over 90% of our sales have been completely organic through this kind of approach, which I think is definitely really a challenge for sure. But it really, how we think about it is investing in an evangelist community to really create a flywheel between that community and earned media.
Thanks, Vanessa. That was really interesting. And I can't believe 90% organic is like a huge number. So clearly speaks to the strength of that strategy and the strength of the brand. And one thing I noticed when I got my Omsom trial pack, like you said, it's super shareable. There's actually 6 packets within the box. So I think you're right. And then I was like, oh, I could give this to a friend, or I could give it to someone else. I have so many. So I wonder if that's something that people are potentially doing.
Definitely. We have heard that.
Yeah, great. I would love to hear more too, Vanessa, about how D2C fits into your strategy. I know that's the channel that you're retailing through, I think, exclusively. So how are you using that to your advantage, and what's the strategy there?
Absolutely. So, when we think about the vision for Omsom, it's really to build the new authority in Asian food CPG. There's such an opportunity there. We think that, the category has been largely stagnant. There's such an appetite for Asian culture, Asian food, that isn't being executed well in the grocery store. And with that vision in mind, we never kind of set out to build just a D2C brand. We always viewed direct to consumer as a launch pad into retail, where we still believe, post pandemic, 80 to 90% of grocery decisions will still be made in store. So to that end, we started with direct to consumer so that we would have that real estate to really tell our story and show consumers why we're really different, and to build that community. It was much more accessible to be able to start to build that online versus in person would be a pretty expensive endeavor. And so that's kind of why we started with D2C, just to kind of prove out our business a bit, get those metrics, and then have more leverage in conversations with buyers. So absolutely, we plan to go into retail. We're starting to get our feet wet there right now and learning a lot. And my approach in general is always to be extremely thoughtful, intentional, and measured in building out new parts of the business and expansion. So we're in a test and learn phase, but absolutely, the vision for Omsom that I see is Omsom in grocery stores across the country, not just in the coastal Whole Foods, but truly I see it in Costco's and Targets, and in the homes and as a staple in folks' pantries, whether you're Asian or you're not Asian, or you're young or you're older. I really believe that's the type of prevalence that an Asian food brand can have, and that's kind of the vision.
I love that. Thanks so much, Vanessa. Would love to now talk a little bit more about brand values and how you're communicating those out. I feel like more than ever, consumers are placing an importance on voting with their dollars and really understanding the brands and products I'm choosing to purchase. What are these companies standing for, and what are they actually really putting their weight against? So I'm curious, Leigh, I know Banza has a pretty clear set of values, and you've taken some actions against that. So how are you communicating what Banza stands for out to consumers?
Yeah, we do it in a variety of different ways. So I think first and foremost, the Banza brand and what we want to communicate in every interaction we have with our customers is Banza is relentlessly positive. So what we really want to focus on in the way we bring our products to life and design our packaging and market our products is the fact that Banza is made from chickpeas, and chickpeas are so good for you. They're so good for the environment. And so you can have pizza every night and feel good about it both before, during, and after, because it is truly made from chickpeas and it is intended to make you feel good. So focusing on what Banza offers from a satiation standpoint, high protein, high fiber, and less so on the things that it doesn't have. We don't talk about gluten-free anywhere on our packaging, is really key to us so that we can become a mainstream and accessible brand. We want all types of consumers, similar to what Vanessa was saying, to really connect with our product over the course of Banza's growth. And so we think by being really positive in terms of how the products can make you feel is super critical to us capturing a mainstream consumer as the company continues to grow. The second thing, and I alluded to this earlier, is one of our core values as a company is food is family. So we believe in the power that food can have to bring people together around the dinner table and share a meal together. And that has been a really key factor in our product innovation strategy. We intentionally choose products that you can share with others and bring people around the table together, because we think there's such power in the community that can be built together over food. And so again, the way we think about new product opportunities and what we should do next, food is family, and fostering that community around food is a really important thing. And then finally, we center everything on the chickpea and of course other beans. At the end of the day, as I mentioned, chickpeas can make you feel so good. They're good for you. They're good for the environment. And so we are intentional about making chickpeas the centerpiece of all of our products, such that, again, we are consistent in terms of how we show up for our customer in every single interaction. Whether you see Banza in the frozen aisle or in the pasta aisle, you will know what the brand stands for, and you will know that you can get a really tasty, nutritious food product that will make you feel good over the course of the long term.
Definitely. I think that's one of my favorite things about Banza is how clear and uncluttered your communications on pack are. You really chose what you wanted to say. And I think so many products that would consider themselves healthy or sustainable are really have a whole bunch of claims. And I know you guys could have a whole bunch of claims on front of pack, but I think it really speaks to almost what Kavita was saying about high-low and being you look like a mainstream product. You don't look like this kind of health foods product. And I think that really speaks to consumers.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. I would love to talk now a little bit more about how you guys have thought about building out your teams. I think, the reason we pulled together this panel is because we really feel that each of you is launching truly innovative products in the CPG space. And I know that this means that you have to have really innovative thinkers working on these products and trying to identify how you do launch products that are really going to stand apart in a very big sea of kind of mediocre products. So I'm curious, how do you think about what are the best hires for your team? Who's going to really be able to help you launch products that will stand apart? And we can start this one with Kavita.
Yeah, I think for me, just throughout my career, and especially in this role, is really bringing together that right blend of a bit of industry experience, but not going too heavy of only industry experts. Because I think something that you'll see and experience so much in the CPG space is a lot of conventional wisdom, a lot of this is just how it works in retail, a lot of just this is how it is. And I think to do something that's truly innovative and different, you want some knowledge of how things work in the CPG space, because that's obviously foundational and important, but also some people who don't and haven't experienced those no's and here's just the rule book of how it has to work. Because I think that's sort of in my past experience driven the best and most innovative products and even brand ideas, because without having sort of the set of rule books and how things are going to have to be within CPG, I think it really does give creative thinkers, people who are innately curious, the opportunity to challenge and say, well, why is it that way? And then drive solutions against, really changing things. So for me, I think, it is having a bit of the team have some knowledge, but also having space to have really sort of just innately curious and having backgrounds that are truly diverse from just kind of what you've done and the industries that you've been involved in.
Definitely, that makes a lot of sense. Vanessa, I'm also curious how you think about this, and I know that's something that's been really prevalent in the last year or 2 years, D&I strategy. How do you kind of think about how diversity fits into your hiring strategy? And I know that's really the crux of your brand too. So curious your perspective there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's a huge part of, how we see the world, especially as I'm a daughter of Vietnamese refugees, right? That's how I see the world, and then also how we build our company. Yeah, I think from day one, diversity of in all the ways, whether that's race, socioeconomic status, or I guess like career to date experience, all of that is something that we think a lot about. And in our experience, what we've been really, really intentional about is really opening the funnel in terms of the hiring process. So early on, in the first interview, second interview, we take a lot of candidates that, might not look on paper like the strongest fit, or candidates that maybe don't have that kind of top-notch pedigree that venture-backed startups tend to look at, really trying to talk to folks of all backgrounds, get to know them. And I've been really pleasantly surprised and really had to question a lot of my assumptions, I think, in terms of talent and what are the markers of the best talent. Our approach has been very consistent across hiring the team as well as working with agencies, contractors, is more often than not at this stage in the journey, we would rather work with the slightly less experienced, hungry, smart, really mission aligned, really bought in people who view working with you as a major step up in their career, or, for their company, or for their own, for their own freelancing work. Whenever somebody sees you as that kind of ticket, I think they're going to give you 110%. And that's more than, that can give you more than 3 years of extra experience in a certain industry. So we tend to take that approach, really train people up, really invest in people. And again, continuing to open up the funnel, not make assumptions about exactly what you're looking for, and give people a chance to prove you wrong by doing interviews that are more applied. So for example, I used to be a management consultant at Bain, and I studied sociology and economics at Harvard. And, I was going against people who had STEM backgrounds, statistics backgrounds. And, for when you're looking at somebody that studies sociology, you might not necessarily think that they're a quant person. And so I was really grateful then to have the chance to prove my ability through a case interview, which is kind of applied 60 minutes, do the work in front of me and just show me what you're capable of. So I very much take that approach in hiring, not from a place of I want to scare you and put you on the spot, but really, I want to give you a chance to show what you're capable of. I don't want to make assumptions about what you're capable of. And that's worked really well for us too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I love the idea of kind of starting, with a thought exercise that levels out the playing field in some ways. So you can just kind of prove how you think live. Great. And Leigh, I would love to hear too how Banza is thinking about hiring strategy, D&I. What's your perspective there?
Absolutely. So building a team that has a diverse set of perspectives and backgrounds is super important to us as we continue to grow the company. So we just hired a head of people, and she is helping us build out goals and requirements and really formalize our hiring practices in a way that removes as much implicit bias as we all have at the very front of the process. So from the way we think about job requisites and job descriptions, all the way through interview strategies and the hiring process and the offer, we're being super thoughtful and putting pen to paper in terms of how do we make this as inclusive as possible, so we fill our pipeline with a really diverse set of candidates. We're excited to work at Banza, who are super aligned with our mission, but also bring a diverse set of perspectives. So this is absolutely something that we're committed to and continue to work on and build out as we grow the team. We are in intense growth mode, so doing this now and continuing to make this a priority is super important to us as we grow and scale. And as we continue to extend into new categories and new product lines, we want to represent a diverse set of cuisines and resonate with consumers from a ton of different backgrounds. So having an inclusive and diverse team at the get-go is super important to us as we grow.
Amazing. It's awesome to hear how much you're really investing in that vision, and I'm excited to watch it come to life. Well, great. Thank you so much, each of you, for spending time with us this afternoon. Unfortunately, we're at time, so we're not going to have time to take extra questions from the audience, but thank you, everyone, and we'll start our next session soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.